Wait a second, this sucks? Yeah, who would have thought something that looks like this isn't a good game controller? That's like looking at a pile of dog shit and being shocked that it smells like dog shit. If you've looked through even a bit of gaming history, there are certain things that are just common knowledge at this point. This is supposedly the worst video game of all time. This is Klonoa. And some controllers suck ass. Well, actually, not really with this one. See, I want to go through a lot of the controllers that are oftentimes criticized or generally considered some of the bad controllers throughout history. And the N64 controller is oftentimes kind of thrown in that discussion. A lot of people don't like it. It has a lot of defenders. I'm kind of in the middle with this. I don't think this is a bad controller, but I think where my criticisms come in is with the fact that this form factor was obviously kind of a means to an end. Like, there's a reason why the N64 controller is the only controller with this form factor, and now we kind of moved past this and how every controller pretty much looks the exact goddamn same these days. But I think this controller was a necessary step to take to get to where we are today. So oftentimes what many people will criticize the N64 controller for is the fact that, oh, I don't know how to use it. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You change it based on which game that you're playing, which is a cool concept, but I find that unfortunately it just kind of limits what games can do with this controller, because yeah, it's cool that like, oh, maybe for a game like Mario 64 you're holding the controller like this, maybe for a 2D side-scroller you hold it like this, maybe for a weird fucking game you hold it like this. Definitely a neat concept that oddly enough makes this controller feel almost like a Swiss Army knife, but at the same time, like, you look over at the PlayStation side of things, not only do you have 2 analog sticks, but you can very easily reach every single button. So you can't have games that utilize every button on the controller. N64, not so much. You can't feasibly have a game that uses the D-pad for some things, and the analog stick, and the C buttons, and the A and B buttons, and the Z trigger, you know, like, it just, your hands aren't meant to do all of this. However, does that mean this controller is bad? No. It's just kind of an awkward little guy, and not even awkward to hold or use or anything. It's just its mere existence is a little awkward, but while you're using it, it works fairly well, and it honestly gives the N64 kind of a certain feel that I don't think any other game console really has. Just the mere fact of holding the controller like this is enough to solidify the N64 as having one of the most like unique feels of any game console. Now, I will say, one major problem with this controller: the analog stick does not age very well. It's a fine analog stick, all things considered, but as you can see, this one definitely wiggles and flops around a lot. I guarantee you, plugging this into the N64, it's gonna work fine, but yeah, I mean, you know, it would be nicer if it was a little bit tighter. I would say the stick is the N64's true Achilles heel. The form factor, it's quirky, it's a little weird, but hey, I mean, it works. And as much as it sounded like I was criticizing it by going like, oh, I can't reach all the buttons here, I mean, no game for the N64 asks you to reach all the buttons, so like, does it really matter? It's more so me kind of looking at this controller and seeing that it potentially could have held back some games in that sense. But all things considered, is the N64 controller bad? No. Is the Atari 5200 controller bad? What do you think? Alright, the follow-up console to the Atari 2600. With this console, they were obviously trying to make this as advanced as possible. I mean, you take a look at the graphics of the games on that console and ooh-wee, like, this isn't bad Pac-Man anymore, this is less bad Pac-Man. The Atari 5200 was Atari's first attempt at kind of moving past the more limited hardware of the Atari 2600. And, you know, I mean, they definitely tried. You look at gameplay of games on the Atari 5200, and yeah, I mean, like, definitely much better than the 2600. It still feels like old-ass Atari, though. However, you can tell they wanted this to be, like, the most advanced possible video game system out there. I mean, the initial console came with 4 controller ports. That was unheard of. 4-player multiplayer. And of course, the controller itself. Ooh la la. This is a pretty damn high-tech looking controller, especially for the time. Nowadays, it feels like this is like some crazy ass little contraption. It's strange because I think this has more buttons than a standard modern controller. It's nuts. They definitely wanted to show how this was an upgrade from the Atari 2600 in nearly every way. I mean, the Atari 2600 controller, it's hard to fuck up with this thing. It's a joystick and a button. That's it. And unfortunately, I think that definitely limited some games. So Atari went to the drawing board and created this for the 5200. Literally pretty much making it so then, hey, don't worry, we will be able to play any game imaginable. We have the buttons to do it. Yeah, so this was kind of a trend in the early 80s, kind of making video game controllers with number pads on them. We're about to see some other early video game controllers with number pads. Strangely enough, I don't think there's a single video game controller with a number pad that was actually a good controller. And every controller that had this idea did the exact same thing. Oh, okay, well, we're gonna have a number pad here just so then, like, hey, any game can use like a bunch of different buttons if possible. And we're going to supply the customer with overlays for every game. Hell, they even designed the 5200 cartridges to have little spots in the back for you to store your overlays. So, you know, when you get Pac-Man for Atari 5200, you obviously want to figure out, like, okay, what do all these buttons do? And, you know, you pull it out of the box, and then you have these overlays, and yeah, it turns out Pac-Man barely does a goddamn thing with the number pad, but you do have overlays for Pac-Man on the Atari 5200 that you can use just in case you wanted to remember none of the buttons do anything other than these, which are for the settings. So you insert that in there, and then you pop that there, and then there we go, we're ready to play some goddamn Pac-Man. What an absolute waste. This is genuinely one of the worst designs for any controller. I mean, like, the keypad is nothing unique. We're gonna see that later down the line. But keep in mind, this is the early 80s. Video games are not complicated at all. And if you have complicated video games, they sure as shit aren't releasing on the Atari 5200, but they just ended up making the most complex controller imaginable. Outside of the keypad, you have 4 goddamn buttons on the side here. And why the hell are they on the sides? To be fair, I mean, it does kind of work with how you will be holding this thing, but obviously I do think, as kind of garbage as the original 2600 controller is, I think it's kind of impossible to hate this controller with just how straightforward it all is. Well, they make sure you know this is up. This is the top, buddy. They were so concerned with you understanding this, and then they just did a complete 180 and expect you to know fucking neuroscience. All right, let's be fair here. There are some interesting little things on the controller. For one, you have 3 top buttons here, which I think these are actually like pretty big additions, not only to this controller, but in general for gaming. I mean, buttons like this were pretty damn rare to see at the time. Possibly, this might have been the first appearance of these kind of buttons. Most notably, I'm talking about a start button and a pause feature. Now, of course, for a while afterwards, the start and pause buttons kind of became the same thing, but these were kind of big deals. And having a reset button on the controller so then you didn't have to actually go to the console itself, that was actually kind of useful. However, I do think it is kind of weird that pause and reset are so damn close together. I almost feel like you'd want these as far apart as possible because, you know, what if you go to pause your game and you accidentally hit reset? That's the exact opposite of what you want to do. However, I think possibly the worst thing about this controller is the joystick. Look at that. It doesn't really reset to the center. It always kind of like stays lopsided or something. It's definitely a very odd feeling controller. This is an analog joystick, which is really interesting for the time. And it has a very odd, rubbery, smooth feel to it. That's something that I kind of wish that the original Atari 2600 joystick felt like. This is unbelievably stiff by comparison. This is so damn smooth. The problem is, it's just not a very good joystick. It feels okay, it doesn't make it great, but biggest problem with this thing, doesn't fucking work. Atari 5200 joysticks notoriously fail constantly. The way they produce these things, these controllers don't just have a high percentage rate for failure. Failure with them is an inevitability. There is always a chance that the insides are just kind of like dirty. You can clean them and whatnot, but they're just, guess what? They're just gonna get all dirty again super quickly. So overall, this controller requires so much maintenance, and even then, you can maintain it super well. It just might eventually just break completely. And that's what we know nowadays. Imagine how people felt about this thing back in 1982. Listen, sorry to blow my load so quickly. This might be the worst controller of all time. You've been spared. Yes, the Mattel Intellivision has a very similar kind of controller design. Yeah, they were just thinking, yeah, this is the future. So why is this controller bad? Why the f did I just ask that? All right, firstly, it is completely hardwired into the system. Great. This controller has like no meat to it. The entire bottom is like carved out so then you can have space to kind of more easily kind of fit the controller back into the system. How the hell do I do this thing? All right, let's see. Oh my god. Oh, you fit the coil in here. See, that's a little window for your coil. And then there we go. And if you push it hard enough in there, you can push the other controller out. Didn't think you'd see this today, eh? You have the two buttons on each side, and these are very rubbery and hard to press. The number pads oddly feel really cheap, really thin. Like these almost feel like puffy metallic stickers or something from the dollar store. But I think one of the worst things about the Intellivision controller is the disc, man. Not a joystick, not a D-pad, but a spinny, weird disc. I will say, I don't think there's really any upsides to this controller. This is genuinely awful. And it also makes it so then when they actually try to re-release Intellivision games on modern platforms for some damn reason, they're kind of a nightmare to play because they have to incorporate like some digital on-screen version of this number keypad display. But you know what? I will definitely give them credit. Intellivision games are oddly enough much more like complicated than a lot of the other games releasing at this time, to the point that I do find that more Intellivision games, or at least it feels like it, actually utilize the number pad. Now, do I really want to use the number pad? Do I want to play Intellivision games? Do I want to be here talking about the Intellivision? No. I want to be here talking about the ColecoVision, damn it! Same damn problem as everything else. Yep. It's back! I will say I prefer the side buttons on the ColecoVision controller. There's only one on each side here. The number pad is still pretty garbage, and it feels kind of sticky and stiff. I don't really like how there's this hard plastic separating all of the buttons. Kind of makes it just really uncomfortable and not fun to swap between different buttons here. But this joystick, oh my god, this thing is so stiff and stupid as hell. Now, I will say, the saving grace of the ColecoVision and all this nonsense is, one, the ColecoVision controller, you can remove. Thank Christ. It also uses the exact same port as the Atari 2600 and Sega Genesis controllers. So, for some games, you can just use a Sega Genesis controller or something. That is, huge.
Ah, Jesus, God, we just can't get out of this era, can't we? This is the Atari 7800 joystick. This was the one released in North America. The European one, as you can see right here, is a bit different. That one, while it isn't anything special or anything that great, it's at least 10 times better than this thing, which I will admit is better than the Atari 5200, Intellivision, ColecoVision controllers. Like, this works better. But like, my lord, what are our standards here? Okay, so I kind of understand what they might have been going for here, because this fits in your hand fairly well. It's kind of easy to like hold it like this, rest your palm kind of here, and then there you go. You can use the joystick and you have access to two buttons. That's kind of a massive problem with the Atari 2600 joystick. The fact that there's not really a very comfortable way to hold this thing. You know, maybe you hold it like this, maybe you hold it like this, maybe you set it on a surface. Either way, it's just a little too small, and there's not really any great way to hold it. So I think from that perspective, this makes sense. But holding it like this, it still doesn't feel very good. It feels like everything is kind of clustered around this one section, and just using the joystick, it's incredibly stiff, incredibly squeaky. Clicking this button with your thumb is pretty easy, but then clicking this button, it feels like a lot more work to get to this one. I already kind of feel my joints are going to work here, like my finger has to kind of stretch a little bit to get this button. To some extent, I honestly think it might be a little more comfortable to hold it like this on the ground and like click the buttons in like this. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, the Atari logo is positioned this way, but no, you're supposed to hold it like this. Really makes me wish we actually got that European gamepad over here, but I mean, you can easily import that, though. This in North America was the standard joystick for the 7800. And yes, I do think it is worthy of being considered one of the worst controllers. It's definitely not the worst. I honestly think all of the number pad options I showed before were definitely worse than this one. I think this controller's biggest sin is just the fact that it's really damn awkward to hold. But that's kind of its biggest problem. Other than that, I mean, like, it does the job. There's worse controllers out there, such as... actually, no, this one's, like, not the worst. The Atari Jaguar controller. Jesus Christ, man. Like, Atari just didn't know what the hell they were doing, didn't they? So here we're entering the 90s with a 64-bit machine, a graphical powerhouse. And they brought back the goddamn number pad. I don't know why the hell they did this. It doesn't make any sense. This didn't work before. I don't know why the hell they thought this would work now, but I feel like they were thinking in the same way they thought with the Atari 5200 controller. How like, okay, well, we gotta make things more complicated. And maybe, you know, okay, back during the Atari 5200 days, the games weren't complicated enough to take advantage of all these buttons. But now, 64-bit games? Oh my god, we need to take advantage of that with all the buttons imaginable. And yep, it still sucks. Similar to all those old school game systems, the games would come with overlays for the controller. And there it is. Yeah, this is bringing back memories. But to be honest, the Atari Jaguar controller, I think, is one of the most overhated controllers in history. Yes, the keypad is stupid, but hey, I mean, take a look at Doom's control pad here. These are mostly reserved for swapping between your different weapons, swapping between melee attacks and gun attacks, your map, and that's pretty much it. For the most part, you can kind of keep your hands up here, and then if you gotta swap over, you can just quickly go there, and then boom, you're good. And with your thumb staying up here, the controller isn't bad. And honestly, the mold of the whole thing is pretty comfortable. Is it incredible? No, but it's a fine feeling controller. Hell, even some of the Jaguar's worst games don't even use the keypad if they don't have a reason to. Kasumi Ninja sucks ass. I did just realize this game comes with a headband though. That's so fun. But you know what else is fun? A fighting game that doesn't use the keypad. And a fighting game has every reason to use a keypad. You know, you have so many different moves, you have so many different options, but no, you look at the game controls, and when you go over to the keypad controls, the 0 button turns the music on or off, and these buttons just reset. That's it. So in conclusion, the Atari Jaguar controller. Is it stupid? Yes. Is it awful? I don't think so. I think it's comfortable. The main buttons here feel pretty damn good. The keypad is not used that much, and when it is, I think it generally makes sense in most games. I don't think the keypad should be here in general, but I think writing off this entire controller just because it has this stupid ass thing, I don't think is fair. Yes, I can criticize this stupid ass thing, but the controller itself, it's not that bad. Now, this by comparison, I can't even fit this in the shot. This is the original Xbox's first controller. This is often called the Duke. And yes, this is absurdly large. Comically even. Just for comparison, the original Xbox's main competitor was the PS2. And these are the controllers side by side. Now, the original Xbox controller is always very strange to go back to because you have these two buttons here, the white and black buttons, which are kind of meant to be like your shoulder buttons, like L and R buttons, because you go over here and yeah, you literally just have triggers, no shoulder buttons. So these pretty much act as your shoulder buttons. They're not in the worst place, not in the best place. You know, obviously a set of shoulder buttons makes a lot more sense because, you know, shoulder buttons I can access while I'm hitting the face buttons. Here, I have to pick one or the other. The analog sticks are very strange because this one, as you can see, is more concave, where this one is more convex. Yet they both have like circles in the middle, but you know, they're just different sizes, which is just kind of a strange sensation. The D-pad here, it's pretty garbage. I don't even know if you can consider that to be a D-pad. That's just a wobbly-ass surface. That's all that is. The start and select buttons are kind of in an odd place. Normally you have those buttons like right around here. But of course, they didn't have room for that on the original Xbox controller because they had to put this giant orb in the middle of it. Hey, just in case you forget the console you're playing. One thing I always found interesting about original Xbox controllers is how they separate here. So, you know, you got that, I guess. Now, of course, as legend has it, this is the Xbox Controller S. And this was initially designed for the Japanese market, but it eventually became the worldwide standardized controller for the original Xbox because I think Microsoft realized this controller was complete overkill. And yeah, I'd say pretty much everything about the Xbox Controller S is better than the Duke. Everything just feels a lot more proportional, and it's still a damn big controller. Seriously, much bigger than the PS2 controller. So, you know, if you still want a bigger controller, the Xbox is where you go. D-pad is much better here. The buttons are in a much more standardized position here. Here, they're goddamn Easter eggs, and they're all at like this weird slant. So here's the thing. I don't mind using the Duke. I think it's kind of fun too, especially when you're going back to the original Xbox. It kind of makes playing that console that much more unique. You know, going back to the OG Xbox, oh my god, this is the damn controller for it. The S feels pretty damn similar to a 360 controller, which is not a bad thing at all. Even though it does still have like some unique aspects to it. The fact that the white and black buttons are still here. The start and back buttons are off to the side. But the Duke is the definition of a unique controller. Now, here's the thing. I wouldn't call this a good controller. I think this is a severe love it or hate it controller. And even though I think that, I'm gonna defy what I just said. I'm saying I'm right down the middle. I neither love it or hate it. I can deal with it. I can use it. But I'm not gonna act like any controller should take fucking notes from this thing. This is big for the sake of being big. It doesn't need to be this big. I think Microsoft was trying to make a weird statement with this. So overall, is this one of the worst controllers of all time? No, but I think it's an honorable mention. Well, if that Xbox controller is an honorable mention, this is I got nothing for it. This just sucks. Oh, I kid. It's the Wii U GamePad, everybody. Me and the Wii U GamePad go way back. So do I think it's the worst controller of all time? Of course I don't. But logistically, I think it is one of the worst game controllers of all time. Because much like the Atari 5200, the controller in this console's case is one of its biggest flaws. This controller helped tank the Wii U. Now, I don't think it was the sole reason for it, but this controller added to the cost of the Wii U, and it's obvious that Nintendo had no idea how to actively utilize this controller. It feels like they designed it when they were thinking of the successor to the Wii, thinking, okay, this is what people are expecting from us. A crazy new controller idea with a bunch of innovative tech thrown in. So then they just created this Swiss Army knife controller with just a bunch of garbage that they never ended up using. Like, oh yeah, it's gonna have an IR sensor, and it's gonna have a camera with a sensor bar baked in, and you're gonna have NFC, and you're gonna have a port that connects to fucking nothing. This controller just has a bunch of bullshit in it. That's what it is. And it's giant. It has awful battery life. The screen is a fairly low resolution. By the time this released in 2012, a lot of this tech, it was implemented well, but it wasn't like this crazy thing. You know, by 2012, we all had iPads, or we'd all used iPads. The screen quality on our phones and on tablets and all of that was great. So when you go over to this, and it's like a 480p display, it's kind of just like, this doesn't really feel all too magical. But for what it is, I always found the Wii U GamePad to be a very comfortable controller. I vastly prefer how this feels in my hands compared to holding a Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Switch 2 in handheld mode for an extended period of time. For example, as you can clearly see, by comparison, the Wii U GamePad has an ass. And it just overall feels so much better to hold this for extended periods of time. And some of the stuff it did in games was cool. Playing games directly on this thing back in the day was kind of useful. And there are some cool uses of like asymmetrical multiplayer where one person's on the Wii U GamePad screen and other people are on the TV. So I'd say functionally, this isn't the worst game controller of all time. I've seen a lot of reviews of this thing where people called it clunky and whatnot. And I don't disagree with the idea that the Wii U in general is clunky. I disagree with the fact that the Wii U GamePad itself is clunky. I don't really think so. I think it does a pretty good job of being a game controller with a screen in the middle and That's about it. It's nothing that special, but it's just like, hey, I mean, like, it's a comfortable game controller. It has a screen. Good for it. Well, let's talk about another game controller with a screen, shall we? It's the Sega Dreamcast controller. Now, the design of this thing is very cute. I mean, you look at this thing, and it already looks like it goes right alongside the Dreamcast console. Like, these things were made for each other. It looks so cool. Looks like a futuristic spaceship. That is so neat. And the big gimmick with this controller is the fact that the memory card in here also has a screen and is a game console in of itself. That is seriously very cool. Now, a lot of games on the Dreamcast don't necessarily do an awful ton with the VMU there, but still, I mean, like, it's such a cool idea. Sega had such amazing ideas. It's a shame that they did not put that same effort into making a great feeling controller. The Dreamcast controller is so damn lame sometimes. All right, here's the funniest little thing. Why does the cord come out of the bottom? You know, they realized they f***ed up because you have to go here and then you see this little divot here, which is where you put the wire. So then it comes out of the top. Why is this even an issue to begin with? But that's just kind of like a weird little quirk. I think overall, the Dreamcast controller kind of falters when it comes to the feel and quality of all the buttons and the stick. The stick is such a slippery, weird kind of plastic. I mean, the top of the stick is kind of a hard plastic in of itself, and I find that my thumb kind of very easily slips off of it a lot. The N64 controller is similarly a hard plastic analog stick, but the grooves it has kind of keeps your thumb in place much better than the Dreamcasts. I just find that using the thumbstick, my thumb is kind of always like falling off, and it just can't really get a good grip on this thing. The D-pad, it's not that great. The buttons here are all fine, and the analog triggers just kind of have a cheap, squeaky feel to them, which, to be fair, I mean, this is an old-ass controller, so that's to kind of be expected. But to be honest, when we take a look at video game generations throughout history, the Dreamcast is always lumped into the 6th generation with the GameCube, PS2, and original Xbox. I don't think that makes any sense. It's like if you look at the 8th generation of game consoles, like the Nintendo Switch is lumped in with the 8th generation, even though they already released the Wii U that generation. The Nintendo Switch is considered just the Wii U's replacement. The Dreamcast was pretty much the Sega Saturn's replacement, and the Sega Saturn was a 5th generation game console. But you look at all the games that released for the Dreamcast, and all the games that released for the Dreamcast were like multi-platform games that also released on the PS1 and N64. It didn't really get a lot of multi-platform games that came out on like the PS2 and whatnot. So yeah, in my opinion, I feel like you should look at this as a 5th generation game console, especially considering the controller, I mean, like, this can't stand toe-to-toe with what you were doing on Xbox and GameCube and PS2 and everything. N64, sure, you have a comparable amount of buttons here. But, I mean, compared to the other 6th generation controllers at the time, yeah, you have the face buttons, you have a D-pad analog stick, you got triggers here, but that's it. You don't even have a select button. You just have one start button. No second analog stick, no white and black buttons or shoulder buttons or anything like that. Well, anyway, I don't think the Dreamcast controller is abhorrent or anything. You know, it's not that I don't like it. I like a lot of elements of it. It does a lot of cool things. However, it's also just not the greatest game controller. It has a lot of flaws. It is what it is. But much like the Dreamcast itself, it's really hard not to appreciate it and like it for what it is. Unlike the PS3 6-axis, which is really hard to like it for what it is, which is lame. All right, now I only had the newer PS3 controllers on me at this moment. So if you look at a PS3 controller, the newer controllers have DualShock 3 written right here alongside 6-axis. Now, the original PS3 controllers did not have DualShock 3 up here. They only had 6-axis. And that's because Sony entered a lawsuit at the time, which forbade them for a little bit from including rumble support in their controllers, which rumble is the shock portion of the DualShock name. So they couldn't call it a DualShock at the launch of the PS3, so it was just the 6-axis controller. And the 6-axis name just comes from the added motion control support of the PS3 controllers. So I'm primarily talking about the 6-axis controller here, just because that's obviously the worst version of the PS3 controller. But at the same time, I kind of want to talk about the PS3 controller in general here because, man, this is one of just the lamest fucking controllers of all time. On top of the fact that it initially didn't launch with Rumble, and some people don't really like Rumble. You know, I can take or leave Rumble most of the time. But, you know, it's obvious, like, it's just like, all right, so this controller just doesn't have something that, you know, became a staple of PlayStation controllers at the time. But I think a couple of things are kind of rough about this controller. For one, man, they weren't changing a goddamn thing, weren't they? You know, I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But Jesus Christ, man. Literally using the exact same controller design ever since the PS1, which was just getting a little absurd. Now, you know, they had pretty much all the things that they really needed here. You know, okay, dual analog sticks, the same amount of buttons. They added a home button, which was necessary. And the triggers are now analog triggers. But I gotta be honest, these triggers are just not ideal. I do not like these triggers. It feels like whenever I use them, my fingers are gonna slip off. I think the way this is kind of angled makes it so then when you press down on this, it doesn't really feel like there's as concrete as a stopping point as there is with something like the Xbox 360 controller. The way these are designed, this one, it's just really easy to just go down, go back up, no problem. This one, I always feel like, oh man, my fingers are gonna slip off of it. But overall, I wouldn't really say this controller is necessarily like awful or anything. It's a fine controller, it's completely functional, but I think that's where the problem is. You see what Xbox was doing with the Xbox 360 controller, what Nintendo was doing with the Wii remote, and they were changing things up. They were moving ahead. You know, the Xbox 360 controller is generally considered one of the greatest controllers of all time. They really kind of went back to the drawing board and designed a controller based off of everything that they learned. PlayStation, it literally looks the exact goddamn same to the DualShock release for the PlayStation 1. And the original PlayStation 1 controller was pretty much meant to be just like a standard Super Nintendo controller with grips and another set of shoulder buttons, and then they added thumbsticks later down the line, but it just shows that the PlayStation controller definitely felt a little stuck in the past. And you know what? This design really did work. I don't think it's completely fair to say, oh, the PlayStation 3 controller is just a Super Nintendo controller again. Bleh! When it's like literally like, okay, well, pretty much every controller follows in the footsteps of the Super Nintendo controller. What I think is lame about the PS3 controller is that it really didn't evolve its design and just kind of added stuff onto a decades-old design at this point to try and fit in the modern day. And it works, but with stuff like the triggers, it feels awkward. Which is why with the PlayStation 4, they finally updated the general overall design of the DualShock controller, to the point that this is one of the most ergonomic and decent feeling controllers. I've had problems with DualShock 4s kind of like breaking down over time and just not really functioning that well over a course of years, but I can't deny, like, this was a huge step up. The overall design of the DualShock 4 is so much more ergonomic than the DualShock 3 ever was. It becomes so much more painfully obvious. This is a controller design from the goddamn 90s, and then this is something that was kind of rebuilt from the ground up, and, you know, you can tell. So, the PS3 6-axis controller, I don't think is bad, but it's just lame as hell. Here we have another lame as hell controller, and this one I would actually consider to be one of the worst of all time. Now, I've been primarily focused on official first-party controllers today. You know, we can dive deep into third-party controllers and accessories and all of that stuff at a later time. I kind of wanted to talk about controllers that kind of just came with the actual consoles. And this is interesting considering this is kind of a, you know, one of the modern clone systems. It's the Retron 5 by Hyperkin. Now, the Retron 5 is kind of like a Swiss Army knife emulation machine that uses cartridges. You pop an NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Famicom, Game Boy Advance cartridge into this thing, and it'll play it. But of course, throughout the years, like, it's easy to criticize this thing. You know, it is emulation. It's not trying to, like, mimic the actual internal hardware of these consoles. So, you know, it gets to a point where you kind of just ask yourself, why don't you just download the ROMs, buddy? But still, downloading ROMs, as easy as it is, you know, it can be kind of just a hassle to do it. Sometimes it's just nice to have a stack of your games and you just plug it into a console and you just go. And the Retron 5 does a decent enough job at that. One problem, the controller for the system is the worst controller ever. All right, so you have this clicky thumbstick, which I don't even really understand why they included that. I mean, like, none of the game systems included with the Retron 5 use a thumbstick or anything. But this thumbstick is very reminiscent of a Neo Geo controller. I mean, that is kind of cool. I always like the Neo Geo clicky thumbstick. But for some reason, all of the buttons here are incredibly clicky. Does that sound fun? In addition, just the overall shape of this thing is abhorrent. Just like this weird ass block. The button symbols make no goddamn sense. I don't understand, like, this is supposed to kind of represent, like, you know, A, B, X, Y buttons, that kind of thing. But for some reason, they design them to be like up, down, left, and right. Which, don't you think that's genuinely kind of confusing, considering up, down, left, and right is kind of represented via this thumbstick? I don't know, this thing sucks ass. At least with the Retron 5, you can use original controllers, so you can just plug in an NES controller, an SNES controller, all of that stuff. But at the same time, it's like, why did they have to make the controller that fucking bad? There's no excuse for that. Speaking of no excuses, let's round things out with the Joy-Con controllers. Yeah, these controllers are pretty bad, but not necessarily in a design sense. These controllers, I do have a lot of respect for them with what they were able to do with them, kind of turn them into the Swiss Army knife of controllers. The fact that you can hold them like this, and you have all the standard buttons from a regular controller, and you can also do like, oh, Wii Remote and Nunchuck-like gameplay. You can pop them on their side, and then they're like, oh, two Super Nintendo controllers. Like, I think Nintendo genuinely looked at the Wii U and how that used, oh, the Wii U GamePad and the Wii U Pro controller, Wii Remotes and Nunchucks, Wii Remotes and Wii Wheels, all of that stuff. And it just became a nightmare. All of the different controllers, all of the different controller add-ons, and they decided to try and figure out a way to create the ultimate controller. Something that can be standard controllers, Wii Remote-like controllers. And I think they did a good job. Now, it doesn't mean I really like using these controllers. These things were already easy to complain about, but when you compare them to the Joy-Con 2, yeah, I mean, like, just having these be a bigger size, it's just so much better. And these still aren't perfect. I think the thumbsticks here are still, like, way too short. I wish they had more grip to them on the back instead of just being completely flat. But overall, these are a massive improvement. I never want to use these goddamn things ever again in my life. They are genuinely way too tiny. You can do it, but it's also like, this is gruesome. The Joy-Con controllers are kind of the definition of a jack of all trades, master of none. On top of the fact that these things have faulty joysticks. The fact that numerous people have talked about Joy-Con drift or their Joy-Cons just not working very well. Nintendo's been through lawsuits about this damn thing. Now, this doesn't make these as bad as something like the Atari 5200 controller, because the 5200 controller just straight up didn't fucking work. The 5200 controller kind of hits you in the face with its faultiness. The Joy-Con's faultiness is kind of silent but deadly. They may be working fine right now, but just you wait, they will eventually turn on you. But overall, to be honest, when it comes to what is the worst controller of all time, and of course, we're only talking about first-party stuff here, I mean, it's gotta be one of the early guys. Something like the Atari 5200 controller or the Intellivision controller. But you know what? As bad as the Atari 5200 controller is, I might honestly have to give it to the Intellivision controller. That thing has no redeeming qualities. At the very least, the Atari 5200 controller, you can go like, oh, well, it had an analog stick and it introduced a pause button. Like, it did have some innovative ideas. The Intellivision controller feels cheap as dirt. The disc sucks. It's hardwired into the goddamn console. Like, what the f is this controller's problem? So congratulations, Intellivision, you suck ass. But hey, I mean, it could always be worse. We could take a look at the worst third-party controllers of all time. That's not a D-pad, that's just yellow.